Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bill Whittle Live on Friday. Just a little bit late off the blocks today. We've got an extra special show for you today. It's Free Friday, which means that we, out of the courtesy of our members, we're going to run the whole show on Facebook without interrupting it and taking the second part to the members only list. However, we've got a really exciting show today because today we're going to be talking about, we've heard so much about all the problems with education, but today I want to talk to you a little bit about the University of the Future. It's 2017, and I've just seen a really remarkable video, I think showing us what our university system is capable of. So, like I said, we're a little late, so let's get rolling, push the button, Neil, and we'll get right into this. Okay, well, here we are, and we want to talk about the University of the Future today, and I'm watching the numbers just drop off here. Maybe I should say you may not be too disappointed in this segment after all, because this is going to be a political segment. So the University of the Future, it's 2017, and we have, when I grew up in the space age, 2017 was going to be the era of jetpacks and under ocean cities and all kinds of wonderful things like that. However, we have some video here from experimental sort of a room in Barnard College. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you the vision of the University of the Future. That'll be from this particular case from Barnard College, where they're doing kind of cutting edge on research on this for 2017. And I will just let it play without comment, and we'll talk about it afterwards. Brace yourself, it's going to be impressive. No, I didn't make it up. It's not a parody video, and what do you say? That is at the university, Barnard University. It's a university room, and you can hear from the music, which sounds like kind of like Sesame Street, because it is Sesame Street. And then if you look on the walls, there's a nice sign, and then up on the walls, I don't know if you noticed that, but up on the walls there's the alphabet. It's an alphabet. It's A, B, C, D. Now these, of course, the alphabet of social justice women, but apparently they were able to find 26 of them. So basically they've got on the walls in this happy little land A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, P, Q, R, S, T, U, so on. Yes. Victoria May says it looks like an elementary school. And it looks like an elementary school because that's what it is. It's an elementary school. It's an elementary school because you're dealing with children who are probably about 5 or 6 or 7 years old. It is, I mean, you just don't know how to. You just don't know how to deal. I don't know how to deal with this sometimes. I just don't know what to say. I'm not often speechless, and this is almost one of those times. Where do you start with this? We've talked before about how this social justice warrior thing is just kind of the tip of the head of the snake, this big fat snake, a bulge of millennials that as they're getting older and older and coming into college. More and more of them are afflicted with this disease, and it's it's beyond parody. It is so disturbing to me. It's so unbelievably disturbing to me. You know, we did a show, a right angle show. I think it was Scott's. It was Scott Ott's show this week, and it was about artificial intelligence in the home. You know, you've got these devices now. You've got Siri, and you've got these devices from Google and Amazon, and they sit on the table and they look like space eggs, and you can address them and you say hello, whatever your name is. Well, hello Siri, and then what is the nearest showing of Batman the Lego Movie? And the Batman Lego Movie showing, it'll just tell you. And so what you've got is you've got a porthole. Now, in every home in America, and presumably in every college in America, not just in something fancy like that, I'm holding a portal right here just like this. In this little box is, connected to this little box anyway, is the sum total of all human knowledge. And I'm not joking about that. The sum total of all human knowledge. They're people who would have given their entire last 20 years of life to have this for 24 hours. You just couldn't imagine what people would do with something like this in the past. So the question we asked on that right angle show, the question I'm asking today, and the question on the larger issue of our universities of the future is simply this. If you have complete access to all of the information in the world, and you do, and everybody in America pretty much does today, believe it or not, then what good does that do you if you don't know what questions to ask, right? I mean, that's pretty much it. If you can ask any question and have an answer, then what good is that if you don't know the questions to ask? I forget who made this quote, and unlike the Mark Twain quote, I'm not going to spend 20 minutes of dead air looking for it, but somebody said, it might have been Mark Twain himself, somebody said, the man who doesn't read is no different than the man who cannot read. And if you think about it, that is a profound statement. This is just simple child abuse. It's child abuse because we keep on enabling it. We don't stop. These little monsters have terrorized everyone, including their professors. Their professors are afraid to speak now because you hear these stories about these women who've been feminists for 40 years or something like that, and they're teaching feminism at a university, and some young Palestinian girl stands up and says, "What do you know about feminism, a straight white woman? The only way you can know about feminism is being by being a gay Muslim woman or transgender or whatever." And so they're constantly trying to outrank each other on the giant scale of victimhood, and that there is no end to that. It's speaking of snakes, it's a snake that eats its own tail. It never ends. They're always trying to top each other. So you've got these are university students who are sitting in a room with coloring books and coffee. I guess it was coffee. It was probably Kool-Aid is probably what it was, and there here are coloring books for you in your safe space, and the music goes do 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 do, and it's not even as advanced as Schoolhouse Rock, for God's sakes. I mean, this is just unbelievable. This is Barnard University, Barnard College, whatever the hell they are. And if it were unique to Barnard, we'd be fine. But no, Cornell University just a day or two ago had a vote on whether or not there should be more intellectual diversity on campus. You remember that word diversity? It's the thing we all bow down and worship every day here in America, especially in the corporate world. So they had a little vote on at Cornell, and they were trying to decide whether or not there should be more intellectual diversity on campus because they did a survey and they found out that 90% of all the 97%, 97.5% of all of the professors at Cornell University were Democrats. 97% of them were Democrats. If I had a university and I had and by the way, the vote was 10-10 in the student council, and the student council president had to come in to break the tie, and he did, and he voted against it. He voted against intellectual diversity on campus. And the way he said it was essentially, having intellectual diversity on campus will hurt our diversity. You see how it works? This is at Cornell University, where Carl Sagan used to teach, if I remember correctly. And what you have is a student council president coming in to break a tie and saying, no, we do not want more intellectual diversity in this university, in this city of ideas, in this academy, this idea where you go to be challenged and to learn new things, and have your beliefs confronted, and work out a philosophy for yourself, a place where research is done, and science, and just, I remember when I got to the University of Florida, it was so exciting because everything was challenging to me. Everything, not just challenging to me in terms of having a course about sitting next to people who I'd never met before, or learning about things that I'd never heard before. It's challenging to me in that I never had to do my laundry before. It was challenging to me in every single way. I had to take care of myself. I had to go get food, and if I didn't get food, I wouldn't eat. And if I didn't do my laundry, my clothes would smell. And that wouldn't be the first student who ever had that decision, but you get the idea, right? The university is supposed to be the place where you no longer are children. That's why they let you live alone in a university. They don't have dorms in most high schools because you're still a child in high school. They don't have dorms in elementary school because you go home when you're in elementary school. And you have a dorm presumably in college because now you're old enough to take care of yourself, at least within the confines of this university system. And what are we doing for these young adults? When I say young adults, I'm just referring to them biologically, of course. Mentally and emotionally, they're 5, 6 years old. Are we helping to cure this problem? No, we're not. We're encouraging them. We're not only encouraging them, we're subsidizing them. So when you have students and they have a situation like Milo back at Berkeley a couple of months ago now, I guess it was, and you've got a situation where somebody's going to speak on campus, very threatening. It's very, very intimidating. God knows what a thin gay man can do in terms of riling up the masses of racist homophobes out there and causing all kinds of violence. But if you wanted to go hear this kind of flamboyant thin gay man, you wouldn't be allowed to do that because the black-shirted, black-hoodied, black-masked students of the University of California at Berkeley have decided that is fascism. You see how it works? We're going to beat people unconscious because you're a fascist, and you want to go hear some gay man speak about feminism, and that's not allowed. So down you go, you fascist. This is not going to end well. It's not going to end well. It's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And we think that we're doing these kids a favor by being nice to them, but we're not. One of the things that is a big part of this is if you see that clip, what does it look like more than anything to you? You know what? I'm just going to run. I'm not going to run the whole thing again. I'm just going to run just a little bit of again, and just take a look at the surroundings. Go ahead, Neil, throw her in there, and tell me what it looks like to you. I can't take any more of it. You know what that looks like to me? That looks like a daycare center to me, is what that looks like. That looks like a daycare center to me. And you know why they make it look like a daycare center? They don't intentionally make it look like a daycare center. You know why it's a safe space? Because so many of these kids who are in universities now were raised in daycare centers. They were raised in daycare centers, and no wonder they need a safe space. They don't have a home. They weren't raised at home. They need a safe space in the daycare center. And let's think about what happens to children in daycare centers, even in excellent daycare centers. What happens to children in daycare centers? Hey, watch this. Ta-da. What happens to them? Well, you have 1 or 2 or 3 people running the daycare center, and you have anywhere from 5 to 10, 20, sometimes 30 kids there. And all of these infants, not even children yet, these infants are demanding attention because they're infants. And now they don't just sit there and go, I hurt my finger, I stubbed my toe, and mommy comes and takes care of you, which is what mommy's supposed to do. But in a daycare center, you do this, you've got to get to the front of the line. You've got other kids who are also demanding attention. And when you realize that it's not just physical attention, you don't just hurt your hand or your thumb or anything. You're crying out for some emotional attention. You need an emotional connection. That's why you're a child. That's what children do. That's how they grow up to be healthy. is by making emotional connections to people, which starts with their emotional connection to their mother. And then it branches out to their father, and then it branches out to their siblings, and so on. But if you are in a daycare center, you are not given one-on-one treatment the way you are even in a family. Even if you had a family of 10 kids, the baby is going to get the attention that it needs, and then the next one's going to get the next amount of attention, and so on. And it's only the first 2 or 3 or 4 years. You don't need much more than that. If you do it within the first 2 years, and you have these, not just this interaction, but this physical bond, this physical touching, and all the rest of it, then you end up with healthy people with self-esteem, because this goes way before they learn about Marx or Freud or any of these guys. Way, way, way before that, part of your brain develops or doesn't develop based on whether or not you get enough emotional stimulation and enough physical stimulation through touch. That's it. You don't have to like it. It's true. If you don't get held enough and touched enough when you're 2, then you're going to spend the rest of your life chasing being held enough and touched enough. And if you have grown up in a daycare center where the only way you get the attention that you should be getting full time is because if the only way you can get that attention is by having a temper tantrum and suddenly becoming now the loudest, the squeakiest wheel in the room, now suddenly you're going to get your attention because you want somebody to talk to you, you want somebody to hold you, you want somebody to play with you, and you're not getting it. So what are you going to do? Are you going to out-polite these kids? Are you going to sit there and with your hands neatly folded on your lap and just try to be as good as you can be to get the attention? Do you think that's really going to work in a room full of screaming kids? No, you're going to scream too. You're going to scream as loud as you can. And you're going to want to get attention. And if you are encouraged in this, if you are constantly given this, not only that this is okay, that this is good, this is great, this allows your mom to have a career or your dad. I want to be crystal clear on this, okay? Crystal clear. I've said this many times before. I just got to go on the record of saying it again. Single mothers, there is no one in the world, no other class of people that I have as much respect for as I have for single moms. What single mothers have to do is absolutely unbelievable. And I see the work and I see the exhaustion. I see all of it. I absolutely understand it. And this is not in any way a condemnation of the single mothers who are out there working their tails off and trying to do all of it and have been abandoned essentially to take care of this problem on their own. And they work very hard, and I have nothing but respect for them. There's no ifs, ands, or buts around it. They're just terrific. Now, with that said, you now have entire generations that are growing up in deep emotional need. Deep emotional need. These aren't even latchkey kids. We talked about latchkey kid as a term that doesn't really mean much anymore. And a latchkey kid was a kid who, when he came home from school, he or she, then mom or dad wasn't home. So they came in and they stayed at home by themselves. But at least they're at home. Right? They've got some kind of a grounding. They've got some kind of a thing. They don't have any emotional foundation. These college kids now, and now they're turning not just college kids anymore. The beginning of these millennials are starting to get in their early 30s now. No wonder they don't know how to deal with adversity. I saw one of the March for rallies, right? March for Trump. One of these rallies, and I saw presumably adult person. I don't know if you've seen the screamer, but it's getting a lot of views. There's an outdoor rally in someplace woody. It's a nice woody word, woody, and they're surrounded by timber. Another good woody word. Sorry, I just had to throw that in for Graham Chapman. So there they are. It's not a big rally, and it looks like it's out in the woods someplace, out in a park or something. And then some woman's on stage, and she's basically, you can tell she's a Republican woman. And she's got that whole kind of look, and she basically says, "Yeah, let's hear it for Trump." And then you hear off camera, you hear this screaming, just and not holding back either. The kind of screaming you can tell that you're destroying your vocal cords on. And the camera pans over, and here's this pudgy 19-year-old doughy looking woman with with, I want to say, with red hair. I was so shocked I don't really remember many of the details. It's kind of like watching a train collision or some other natural catastrophe, tsunami or something. You're just so overwhelmed by it you can't really remember the details. But in any event, she was basically standing there and she was shooting two birds, which I will simulate with two fingers. You see, so we're not doing anything. So she's basically going like this, but using just the one finger, so it was half as effective. And she was at this rally in the audience, and the woman on stage was speaking, and this person started screaming, and that's all she did. That was the limit of her protest. Ah, 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 and it went on and on and on, and finally the crowd starts chanting, USA, 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 and that confused her quite a bit. You could tell she was like, what? And then she confused her so much she started going, USA, USA. I don't know what she thought she was doing. She was mocking, but then she started screaming again. And then, look, I really do like, I do like the response. I have a certain amount of Schadenfreude on this, or whatever that German word is, and I just, people who know the meaning of that word, I just can't stand those people, and I hope something awful happens to them. But you want to be. You want to laugh at him, and you really do, because it's so outrageous. So anyway, she's after the USA chanting had gotten her confused, she's still screaming, ah, ah, and some guy or somebody, I think it was a guy, came up behind her, and she went, ah, and the guy behind her went, ah, and then everybody else in the crowd started screaming, ah, and the crowd goes, ah, and everybody else in the crowd went, ah. So now we're all screaming at each other, and we are now well into our descent back into caveman times, because we're not even using language anymore, right? We're not using language anymore, and it's not the Trump people that are not using language. It's not the Republicans that are not using language. It's these children who are so incapacitated emotionally and mentally that's all they know how to do is scream. Do you ever wonder? I wonder about this all the time. Do you ever wonder why when you see these so-called adults protesting, it's always a chant? Always a chant. It's always a chant. Hey, hey, ho, ho. Discrimination's got to go. Whatever it is. And they just stand there and they chant. And this started back in the 60s. And we're going to get to the 60s in a second here. They started back in the 60s. And they basically decided that if we chant loud enough, then we'll have our message heard. And I bought that explanation for the longest possible time. And then I realized that the reason they're chanting is because they cannot think. They're chanting because they can't think. If you wanted to run a protest about something that was worth protesting, let's just say government-mandated healthcare, for example, what you would get is you would get a bunch of speakers, and they would all be of differing backgrounds and differing races, differing ages and sexes and so on. And you would have a rally, and in the course of 2 or 3 hours, you might hear from 7, 8, 9, 10 people, maybe 15 people, something like that. And one by one, the people who were protesting would come up to the microphone, and the audience would listen respectfully, because that's why they're there. And then somebody would elucidate some part of this issue that they didn't like. And if the audience agreed with them, then they would cheer. But it was 2 or 3 hours of a lecture, essentially, and I ought to know, because I was a part of these things for a long time. I am a part of these things, and I'd like to continue to be a part of these things. You listen to a Tea Party protest or any kind of a conservative kind of a movement, and you notice two things. The first thing that you notice is every single time that I've been to a Republican event, Tea Party event, or anything like that, they either sing the national anthem or they say the Pledge of Allegiance, often both. And I thought about that for a while, and I thought, well, maybe we're just more patriotic than they are. But I realized it's actually a security measure, because if there are any progressives out there in the crowd, secret agents, with cameras and stuff, and you ask them to say the Pledge of Allegiance, then they'll just burst into flames, and then you'll know who the problem is. There's a giant gaping hole will open up, and sulfur and fumes will come out, and they'll descend back into the pit that they came from. So it's fun to make fun of these people. But if you go to a Tea Party rally, what you hear is intelligence, and you hear passion, but you also hear argument, and you hear reason, and you hear different perspectives on the same problem. What you don't see at a Tea Party rally is a bunch of people standing there going, hey, hey, ho, ho, Obamacare has got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho, Obamacare has got to go for 2 hours. You know why? You know why we don't do that? Because we're not infants. That's why. Because we're not children. That's why. Because we're not absolute babies. That's why. And why can we afford to debate a point like this? Not everybody in the Tea Party agrees on everything. I've been up on stage with people who I disagreed with before and after me, those poor bastards. But in any event, you're out there and you hear a difference of opinion, and that's because this is what adults do in a civilization. You see, when you have a civilization, you have to have a civilization built on adult behavior, because if you don't have any adults in the civilization, you don't have a civilization anymore. You have people chanting and shooting birds and flipping fingers and screaming at the top of their lungs when they want some kind of change, when they didn't get what they want. That's what you get. You get, ah, ah. That's what you get. And it's just plain tribalism, and it's getting worse and worse every day. Worse and worse every day. And that's why the election of Donald Trump was not only the best thing that could happen to these people, who let's just despite the fun I have mocking these awful people, let's not forget that that these students are not the ones that set their own educational curriculum. As tempting as it is to want to pin this on their moral failures, we have to really understand, if we're going to take some responsibility for this enough to fix it, we have to understand that when you're 4-year-old and you go to elementary school or kindergarten or whatever, and they decide that everybody gets a participation trophy, that 6-year-old didn't vote on that. That wasn't his decision or her decision. It wasn't his or her decision to go to daycare. It wasn't his or her decision to determine that we're not going to hurt their self-esteem. What we're going to do is we're going to build their self-esteem, and then they'll accomplish things. It's not their fault that that the people inflicting this progressive theory on them think that that's how self-esteem works. We tell you you're great, you're great, you're great, you're great, you're great, and then you go out and do great things. That's not only not how self-esteem works, it's pretty much a certain recipe for not having any self-esteem at all. And this is part of the issue. This is part of the entire issue. The whole safe space issues, the whole freedom of speech issues, the whole rioting, the whole we're going to burn cars so that people don't have to hear Milo Yiannopoulos or Ben Shapiro or any of them. It's all connected to the same thing. It's connected to the fact that these are children, and if they've never ever grown up, and it's not their fault that they never grew up. You could say that, well, they're adults now, they're making a decision, and they're making a decision to riot, and they're making a decision to do this, and they're making a decision for their safe spaces. But I'm sorry, I'm going to have to disagree with your premise. They're not adults making decisions. They are adult-age children who are trying to make decisions. And they've been made children by the progressives. And there's nothing you can say to argue against that. There's just nothing to say about it. It's just true, and we know it's true. And these progressives who've never done, one of the things I do a show called The Stratosphere Lounge, for those of you who don't see it, and for about a year there I was talking about this theory called RK, and it was about two different kinds of strategies for survival, for passing on your genes. One is to have lots and lots and lots of children, and the other one is to have quality children. And it's a long, long story. I'm not going to get into it. I will someday. However, what this person theorized was, when you have animals that have to compete, like wolves, as opposed to rabbits don't need to compete. You don't have to breed a superior rabbit. Rabbits don't have their parents taking care of them for 4 or 5 years, teaching them exactly how to hop or chew. Rabbits basically multiply, because being a rabbit is relatively simple. If you're a wolf, on the other hand, and you're up above the snow line, you've got to have a little bit more fitness, because food is very scarce up there. So hello, London. What this theory basically says, and this makes a lot of sense to me, is that play accomplishes two things in children. And children don't get to play anymore, by the way. Not the way I understood play. You know what, Neil? Write down on your hand the word play, okay? Because I'm about to go off into the weeds here for a second. When I come back, I want to remember where I was. When you have... I know this all sounds like when we were kids, and I know that there was probably, I remember this sentence from some alien handbook. It's not my sentence, it's just wonderful, though. And he basically said, back at the walls of Jericho, there was probably some, flinty Israelite sergeant saying, oh, you kids with your horns and trumpets trying to blow down walls. When we went after walls, we used to go after them with a stone axe. So this whole business about this generation goes back to the beginning of time. But when I was a boy... See, I'm getting near 60, and you can tell because I'm saying things like when I was a boy. But when I was a boy, play meant that you would come home after school and you would either do your homework or not, and then you would go outside. And do you know where you went? No, you didn't know where you went, and your parents didn't know where you went either. You know why? Because you didn't know where you were going. You were going outside to meet some friends, and then you might do any number of things. You might ride your bike. You might ride your bike a long way. Maybe you'll play some football. Maybe not. Maybe you'll hide out in the bushes and spy on girls. Maybe you will do. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say spy on girls. What I meant to say was observe the glorious diversity of our sexual tolerance here in America. That's what I meant to say. Sorry about that. And so all of this was learning. Play is learning. We play to learn. We think we do it for fun, but fun is the way that makes sure we do it, and we do it to learn. If you're learning on how to become independent, if your whole idea of play is to go out into the world, maybe just for an hour or two, and maybe it's just in a park, but if your whole idea of learning is to figure out how some elements of the world works, then what is play today? Is play today what it was for, not just for my generation, but for every single human generation prior to my generation? That's why these kids are in such trouble. It's not just the, space age Apollo kids like me. I had a version of play, but everybody's played. Everybody's played from the beginning of time. Since there's been humans to now, we go outside and we play, and it's unstructured, and that's why it works. Charles Miller says we would go out and explore the woods. Yeah, man. Do you remember what that was like? Do you remember how cool that was? You thought you were like on the other side of Canada or something. You might be 200 yards into the overgrowth someplace. You're probably closer to a 7-Eleven than you are to any kind of an animal. But the point is, it felt like you were out there. You were exploring in the woods. We used to explore in caves. We'd go swimming. We'd find places, things we hadn't seen before. We rode our bicycles and there's a point to all of this reminiscing. Please believe me. Although it's mostly the point is that it just feels good doing it. We would ride our bicycles for 30 miles. 40 miles. That's a bit of a bike ride when you're 12 or 13. We wanted to go to the Dade County Youth Fair, which is down in South Miami, practically Homestead. I lived on Key Biscayne. It's a 20, 30-mile bike ride. It took us 2 hours. And we had fun. And we did learn. And you know how we learned? I'll tell you how we learned. We learned by doing things like the thing I'm about to explain to you now. Here's how we learned when we were kids, before play dates and rubber, all the rubber matting on the floor of outdoor playgrounds and all the rest. Here's what learning meant to me when I was a boy. We went on a very long bike ride, as I said. It was about a 20 or 30-mile bike ride, something like that. And I was with 3 other friends, and we were all riding bikes. And we got off of the causeway, and we got to a kind of a back road. It was in the direction of where we're going. So it was kind of nice back there and shady, and we weren't in a super big hurry, and there was no traffic on this road. So my friend Steve, who I think I might have talked about yesterday or the day before or something, is just prone to this kind of thing. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. And Steve, who I saw just a little while ago, so that's 47 years now, 48 years, something like that. And Steve would say something like, so give us a little break here because we're 12 or 13. And Steve would say, all right, I'm riding the Green Goblin, because he had a green bike. And she's got this, and she's got these, they got the mag wheels or whatever, and she got the high handlebars and the big, the big sissy bar in the back and all. And he's just basically talking about his bike. And then the next guy just picks it up and he starts talking about his bike, which was gold. And I was third, and I just had a brand new 10-speed bike. So you know what those are, with little kind of little handlebars there. And so it was my turn, and I said, well, I'm riding this Silver Bullet, and because it was a silver bike, and down at the fork at the front of the bicycle wheel, there were the little tips of it were red. So I'm talking about my bike and how awesome my bike is, and I'm basically saying, all right, I'm on the Silver Bullet, and it's got these wicked cool blue handlebar tapes, and then down at the bottom it's got these red, and right around in the middle, red. I went to point to the red tips of the spokes of the fork on the front of the bike. I went to point to it with my foot, but unfortunately my foot got caught into the spikes, and the foot went around, hit the back of the fork, and the front wheel just locked up. It just locked up, and I went like that, flying through the air. I don't remember flying through the air, and I don't remember landing on my back, but I do remember this. My bike landed on top of me like some kind of Spartan shield. And I remember looking up and saying, God, you know what? Fritz is going to run right over me. And he did. He's nothing, no time to relax. So I was like a jump, like a ski jump for him. You know, like those little boards that you try to do when you're a kid, try to get some air. That's what I was. And he came running over, just trying to stop, and he just jumped over me. And I'm lying there on the ground, and I got up. And can anybody guess what my first words were getting up after this? After this nightmare? There's too much of a delay, otherwise I genuinely would wait. But my first words were, when I had been run over, landed on my back on a concrete road, scratched up and bleeding a little bit, my first words as I got up were, is the bike okay? And if you can relate to that, you know what I'm talking about. So this is how we learn things. I saw a kid... I'm just going to make this just going to be the reminiscent show, but I don't know if I've ever told this story. When I was living in Bermuda and I just learned to ride a bike, and you learn that things like you maybe should want to make sure your shoelaces are tied tight before you ride a bicycle. These are things that you learn when you're out there playing unsupervised. And in Bermuda, which was pretty hilly, there was a house very close to us, and it was a house that was for sale, so there's nobody living in it, and had a very steep driveway, and then the driveway curved around to like a little circle where you could park your car and then turn around and drive back up this driveway. Well, as this driveway made its curve, there was a little hill. At the time, it seemed gigantic. It was probably a 5 or 6, not even that, 3 or 4 foot berm, something like this. And so one of us geniuses realized that if we were up at the top, we could ride our bikes down the hill, get a lot of speed, and then instead of turning, we'd just go straight. And it was just a kind of a pre-built jump. Next thing you know, you're at least 4 feet in the air, and you could catch some wicked air and feel like Evel Knievel, and be just a general badass. So they're starting to do this, and they're starting to pedal down this thing, and I sat there and I watched this kid, and he didn't just coast down that hill. He got to the top of the hill, and he stood on those pedals and grabbed the handlebar, and he just started really cranking, and he got down to the bottom of this curve, and then just when he was about to turn, he knew he was going to go straight to pull the stunt. Just as he was heading out there to do the stunt, he had the guts, to pull back on the handlebars, like he's gonna almost like do like a wheelie through the air like this. And that's exactly what he did. And I remember I'll never forget as long as I live. I remember seeing him coming here. I was standing off to this side, and I watched him go, and I saw him pull back on the wheels, and I thought, that's awesome. And just as he did that, his front wheel left the bike. He pulled back, and the front wheel just went through the air like this. And I remember, it's so funny because sometimes when you're in a situation like that, time slows down. And I remember like I could almost see the parabola, and I watched the wheel go off, and I remember thinking, this isn't going to end well at all. It's not going to end well at all. And sure enough, the 2 front forks of the bike came into the soft, wet grass, and then he went forward, and as I live and breathe, he made a face-shaped hole in the grass. I'm not going to go online and tell you that I could make out the eyes and the nose and anything, but there was a hole in the shape of his face in the grass. And he got up and he dusted himself off and said, how's the bike? So this is what we did, and this is why we don't cry and scream, and this is why people like me and you do not need safe spaces on our university campuses, because we've been hurt, and because we've been in arguments, and because we've had friends and lost friends, because we've dealt with people. Now, today, you don't get to just go out there and do stupid stuff like this. We survived, by the way. I happen to think of all these safety things. I think a bike helmet's actually a pretty good idea, to be honest with you. I think that one is actually not a bad idea. But I do not have any memory of any kids, any friends of mine, or anybody in school, anybody that I knew of who died of a head injury because they were on a bike without a helmet. So we got out there and started to learn how the world works, and we started to learn things like, if you're going to point to the front of your bicycle with your shoe, be sure that the shoe does not go into the spokes of the wheel, because that will end badly. And we did all these things. Now, what happens to kids today? And I'm talking about not just the kids at this moment, but what happens to these kids who are now at these universities? What's their story? Well, when they're young, maybe they meet somebody, you know how you form friends in school. You kind of get along, you start talking, everything's great. And nowadays, if it were me, little Billy would say, Mom, can I go over and play at Steve's house? And Mom would say, well, let's see. And then she would get your friend Steve's mom. And then your mom, this is what happens today, and her mom would sit there, and she would say, we could do Saturday at 2. He's free from 2 until about 3:30. He's got a karate class at 3:30, but we could probably do 2 to 3:30. And then the other person on the phone says, "Two's not really working for me. We're gonna be in the morning. He's gonna be taking his acting lessons and stuff until So well, what about next Thursday? Thursday night's not good. Can we do Wednesday? Yeah, I guess we could probably do Wednesday, but we're gonna have to kind of keep it short." So the next thing you know, this kid is watching these adults negotiate the hour or two, maybe two, that this kid is going to be able to play. And then he's going to be able to play. And so, okay, so what is play now? Play is a heavily structured, tightly controlled, part-time activity, which is just another thing you do between your pottery lessons and your yoga class when you're 6. It's absolutely structured. Your parents are there. Mom, we're going to go outside and play. Where are you going? We just want to kind of just drive around for a while. No. Stay in the yard. Well, can we go to the playground? Well, we'll have to go with you to make sure you cross the street, okay? And we have to go to the playground that has the little rubber shavings so that if you fall off the handlebars, or the monkey bars rather, I fell off of handlebars. You fall off the monkey bars, then, you won't be damaged in the least. So when you treat kids like that, where do they ever learn? Where did they learn? Where do they learn? I'm not going to bore you with the story I've told 100,000 times. I started Little League Baseball. Our first year we were 0-10. We didn't win a single game. I will bore you with it. And our coach was named Mr. Kirkwood, and he was a real estate guy, and I miss him very much. And I haven't seen him since 1970, 71. And Mr. Kirkwood would say, "All right, well, you guys did your best," because we did. He says, "Well, go to 7-Eleven, we'll get you all Slurpees, and we'll get them next week." So we didn't win a single game. Next year, I came back and moved me from right field to first base, and we went from 0-10 to 10-0. If I hadn't gone 0-10, the 10-0 wouldn't have meant anything to me. I remember winning the first game that season, just one, and I was overjoyed. But the big issue here when it comes to progressives is when I was part of a team that lost 10 games in a row the entire season, and I was on the field maybe for 3 innings, 4 innings, and right field, by the way, we all know right field's where you put the worst players. So the question is, did that hurt my self-esteem? Did it cause me emotional damage? It didn't. It didn't cause me emotional damage. I'll tell you what it caused me. It caused me to understand that winning and losing is based not only on effort, but it's also based on talent, and it's based on coaching, and it's just based on how things go. And I realized that I was making friends with these other guys because they knew what it was like to lose 10 games in a row too. And we didn't give up. We didn't just go, "Oh, we're just sucking." No, we're just saying, "Okay, well, we'll get them next time." And we did. And of all the things I learned in losing 10 games in a row in Little League Baseball, I learned that Mr. Kirkwood, who's probably in heaven now, certainly deserves to be there, because what he made clear to us was that it was not the winning or the losing, it was how you played the game. I know that's what we used to hear all the time. No one's ever heard that today. It wasn't whether you won or lost the game. It was, did you do your best? How did you do? Did you give up? No, we never gave up. And he bought us a Slurpee. He rewarded us when we failed, because we failed honestly and because we failed trying. And so failure wasn't such a big deal for us. And to the degree that it hurt playing Little League Baseball. It's different than failing because you can't hold a job. And you can't hold a job because you don't know how to concentrate for more than 20 minutes without checking your Facebook page. So all of this back to our universities of the future. It's not a very bold future. It's not a very brave or interesting future. It's not even really the future. It's the university of the future is the kindergarten of the past. That's just the facts. That's what it is. You saw the video for college students, which had happy little, almost like Teletubbies music, and the ABCs were on the wall, and there was a place for hot chocolate, and I don't know if you saw the lower third, but there's also coloring books and crayons! Exclamation point. So just to close this show, I'm curious, what do the faculty at Barnard University think that this is going to accomplish? What is their objective in this? What is the objective on the part of a college administration that has not only set up a safe space, which looks like the daycare center that was their only safe space, but what does it say about these administrators to, on some level, they must understand, and the students must understand too, that the space, the safe space, the social justice warrior safe space on campus is simply kicking the can down the road. It's just the university saying, hey, it's not our problem that they came in here as children, and God knows we're not going to educate them or teach them anything other than things they already know. It's not our problem. We're not going to take the heat for trying to belatedly make these children into some kind of adults. We're not going to take that heat. We don't want them protesting us and calling us racist. So they create a safe space, and the can gets kicked down the road. And 18-year-olds don't deal with failure or frustration or anything when they're 18. Now they'll wait till they're out of college to deal with it when they're 23, and the stakes will be higher, and so on. No one's going to do anything. They're not going to do anything because this is what progressivism is. It is an idea that occurs to a few intellectuals with no experience in the real world who failed when they were trying to play. They failed. And they have then imposed that failure on everybody, feeling like, well, since I failed, we should all be doing what I'm doing. I'm very simple what I mean by that. The reason I asked Neil to write down the word play is because what we find is that play is not just learning about things like bicycle wheels and gravity. I had many lessons in gravity. It's about more than that. Play determines whether or not you feel comfortable, I don't want to say competing with other people, but interacting with other people. Do you feel comfortable? Can you play on a baseball team? Can you play on a Little League baseball team? It's not a question of whether you can hit the ball or whether you can catch the ball. I hit a triple, and it was a pretty good catch. Slower than Christmas, and I had no arm at all. But the question is, can you do it? Can you sit on a bench and watch the game start and want to be in the game and not be in the game and have to wait till the sixth inning because there's 15 kids on this team? Can you do that? Can you deal with the fact that somebody's depending on you, and maybe you dropped the ball that could have saved you and won the game, or maybe you struck out when you were everybody was counting on you, and it's you. That's the great thing about baseball. It's a team, and it's also an individual at the same time. You're standing up there as an individual at the bat. You know what the stakes are. You got all of your friends lined up over here. You got all these other horrible monster kids on the other team over there. And it's up to you. And they're waiting for you, and they're depending on you. And you do your best, and you let them down. And you go back, and as Charlie Brown would say, you're not the hero, you're the GOAT. Can you be the GOAT? Yeah, I could be the GOAT. It turns out I could be the GOAT. It wasn't fun. I didn't like it. It wasn't like, wow, it was awesome to strike out. I'm so glad I didn't hit a home run and win the game. I never thought that at all. I'm not suggesting you should feel that, but I am saying you learn whether or not you're good. And I got to just answer this. Doc Derrick says, maybe you lost a comrade in battle like I did in Baghdad. Survivor's guilt like crazy. Jeez, Doc. I'm just going to have to address this. If you and your friend were in different positions, and it had been you that had been killed and your friend that survived, would you want him to feel that way? Is that what you'd want for him? If it were you looking down on him, and he spent the rest of his life feeling guilty that he was alive and you weren't, is that what you would want for your friend? It's not what I would want for my friend. And I know when you talk about it, just the fact that you mention it, you know the answer to this question. You know. So forget about what the people say, and forget what the media says, and forget about what the command structure says or the VA says, and forget about what society says, and forget about what comedians say and musicians say, and forget about what I say, because none of this matters at all. The only thing that matters is, what would your friend say? What would his opinion be? And I know what his opinion would be. So don't do that. You have to stop doing that. You don't have to stop doing it for yourself or for me or for your country or anything. You have to stop doing it for your friend. You have to stop doing that, and just free yourself from it. Okay, just look at it and face it, and don't run away from it. You had the courage to mention it, so okay. He wrote back and he said many things, but he said, as long as we remember them, they're still with us. That's true. And that's very true, but that's not exactly the point I'm making. And I don't want to spit in the face of this beautiful reply, but it's really, really important, because if you say something like that, it's like, as long as we remember them, they're still with us, that's going to be a cliche and it's going to wear off. That's not what we're talking about. You can remember them all you want to. You're remembering them all the time. That's why you feel so guilty, because you're remembering him. You're here and he's not. That's why you remember him. And that's why you're so guilty. That's not the point. The point is, what would he have wanted for you if the situation had been reversed? If you honestly, genuinely think that your friend would have said, no, I'd like Doc, basically, to spend the rest of his life feeling miserable because he didn't save me, or he didn't do what I was supposed to do, or somehow he got lucky. If you do genuinely think that that's what your friend would have wanted if it was the other way around, nah, I want, it's my bad luck that I got killed, so what I really want is my friend to feel miserable for the rest of his life and beat himself up over something he had no control over. That's what I want. That's what I want from him. No, that's not what he wants for you, and you know it, and I know it, and you got to stop beating yourself up over this. It's not for your benefit or my benefit or the country's benefit. It's for the benefit of your friend who didn't come home. You've got to do it for him. You got to just stop doing this for him. Okay? Not for me or for anybody else or this flag or anything. You got to do it for your friend. And the reason you went to Baghdad, Doc, and your friend too, is because you're not children. That's why. Because you're men. You're honorable men. And you were here to defend us and the rest of us here, and you did everything you could in your power to do it, and so did your friend. And I'm proud to be part of the same country as people like you. I don't know where we get people like you, but I'm glad we find them. And some of them don't come home, and that's awful. But the ones that do come home, Doc, they should have a chance to come home, right? Come home. Come on back. We don't need you to stay out there. I think this is probably going to be the end of the show right now, and I'm going to look at the screen down here because I don't want to look up at the camera. But that was our Free Friday for Bill Whittle Live, and we will be back. We will not be back on Monday. I'm going to be doing NRA TV on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and we'll see. I think I might have to take the whole week off. I'll give you updates definitely from the road. Maybe I'll be able to do a couple from the road, but I'm out of town Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in Dallas, and then I'm at Palm Beach till Friday. Then, so it will be back a week from Monday, and if I can do them on the road, I'd be happy to do them on the road. Okay, that'll do it for Bill Whittle Live today. Thank you very much for joining us. And that message doesn't just go out to Doc. It goes to all of you out there who know what he's going through, even military or not in the military. Don't forget that, what they want. Okay, let's push a button on this one, and we'll see you guys just as soon as we can.